G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Now, within a fortnight, we've gone from hydroelectric dam experts, submersible experts, and now all of us are nuclear power plant scientists. So it is amazing how the internet reaffirms people's years of study they've done on these particular topics and then how they can spew out absolute facts. Of course, I'm joking, but people will swing to and from and suddenly think they're an expert without actually listening to then the experts. So let's talk about this. The big talk of what's going on is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And the usual people who are beating the war drum on both sides, I think secretly actually want this to happen because they're sitting cozy in their homes far away on Twitter and won't actually be affected by this. Or I guess would they? And what I'll say is, no, we do not want this to happen. We don't want NATO to have to invoke Article 5. We don't want anyone to be irradiated, even if it fits your narrative. We don't want that to happen to this land, to the people, everything. This is worse than people would think, and just because you don't have much going on elsewhere doesn't mean that we want this to happen to fit your narratives. Either way, this would be a horrible thing if it happened. Plus, anyone can make a 4chan post, give some obvious details, and it spread like the tumour through my smooth brain. So just because someone's saying it on YouTube with me or someone in written text, whatever, doesn't mean they have a clue of what's going on. And it doesn't mean that there's some CIA Secret Service guy posting on an internet channel. We can all do that. So take things with a grain of salt and actually look at who is telling you this. And so if you want to hear from actual CBRND experts, being chemical, biological and radiological and nuclear defence experts, I'll link the two podcasts I did below on detection, the threats and protection. A lot of other, they're hours long. Guys that are actually trained in this and have done things like this, both in exercise and somewhat degree of live. So of course what has come out is the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, saying that there is a threat of this with this Twitter post. This is translated across from here. Now we have information from our intelligence service that the Russian military has placed objects resembling explosives on the roof of several power units of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So resembling, it doesn't mean that they are, perhaps to simulate an attack on the plant. Perhaps they have some other scenario, but in any case, the world can't but see that the only source of danger to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is Russia and no one else. Unfortunately, there was no timely and large-scale response to the terrorist attack on the Novokhovka hydroelectric power plant, and this may incite the Kremlin to commit new evil, and is the responsibility of everyone in the world to stop it. No one can stand aside as radiation affects everyone, and accompanied by a video that we will go over in a second. Now, would this explosion be as bad as Chernobyl? Of course, the very infamous nuclear meltdown caused from a lot of problems in Ukraine. And from my little bit of research on this, no, it would not be as bad, as the Chernobyl explosion was a graphite-based reactor, therefore the spread was much larger, therefore worse. It would be more similar to the 5 Mile Island incident, but is still horrific. So let's go over what Zelensky had to say in his 5-minute daily address today. So first off, he starts off that he wishes everyone health, and that President Zelensky has finished a conversation with the President of France, being President Macron. And we know that Macron has a lot of issues going on in France at the moment with the large-scale riots, which he said was something to do with video games. I'm not sure if that is totally correct, Mr. Macron. Zelensky speaking here about the conversations with NATO, about the security, of course, coming up into the NATO conference, I believe, next week, and that the frontline weapons and the capabilities that they will need to receive to then keep the counter-offensive and the offensive needs going on from here.
Домовились про нові оборонні пакети, і, до речі, я дякую Еммануелю за те, що сьогодні почала надходити та зброя, про яку ми домовлялися. Ракети, танки, але, звичайно, говорили сьогодні і про більш стратегічні речі, про те, яким буде безпековий фундамент Європи після цієї війни і нашої перемоги. Щоб мир настав швидше і був тривалим, чесним, справжнім, російське зло повинно бачити, яку межу для амбіцій Кремля встановимо ми. Саме ми, усі вільні європейські нації, усі в нашій євроатлантичній спільноті, а не російські терористи та будь-які їхні шантажі та агресія. Ми щодня додаємо змісту саміту НАТО, який відбудеться у Вільнюсі.
So NATO summit in Vilnius next week, which Ukraine is going into. Now, of course, Ukraine is not going to get NATO membership. It's not going to happen until the war has ended. At least 99%. I'd put my house on that. But we do know that Ukraine is trying to then fulfill the needs for NATO membership by the end of the conflict to go in from there. But the conflict, of course, needs to end first. But there is still a dramatic amount of support from NATO to Ukraine. We'll talk a bit more on this.
Я вдячний усім нашим партнерам, які працюють разом з нами, урядовцями та нашою командою міжнародників Офісу щодо підготовки до зовнішньополітичних заходів, які відбудуться найближчим часом. Дуже важливо, що
So, very importantly, the situation at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is what we'll speak of in the beginning of this.
має бути свідомий того,
This is a
що
common
спільна
security
безпека повністю
depends.
залежить від глобальної уваги до дій окупантів на станції. Росія повинна чітко усвідомлювати, світ бачить, до яких сценаріїв готуються терористи.
So he is saying that the world sees what is being set up, but I don't believe, from what I'm seeing, that the whole world agrees with what is being said, what is being shown. But we do know the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was occupied by Russians in the very beginning of this conflict.
І світ готовий реагувати. Радіація – це загроза для всіх. Для всіх у світі. І атомна станція повинна бути повністю убезпечена від будь-яких радіаційних інцидентів. Сьогодні рівно 16 місяців, як російські військові
And of course, calling for protection for the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And we'll talk about the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
повністю контролюють територію та споруди Запорізької АЕС. У різних держав світу є власні розвідувальні та інші можливості, щоб точно знати, що відбувається і хто в цьому винен. Зараз від нашої розвідки ми маємо інформацію про те, що на даху кількох енергоблоків Запорізької атомної станції російські військові розмістили предмети, схожі
So this is the running scenario. They're saying that it would simulate Ukrainian shelling onto the plant. We'll talk about that in a second.
на жаль, не було вчасної і масштабної
Saying here that there was no timely and large-scale response to the attacks on the Novokhovka dam, the hydroelectric power plant, which, of course, Ukraine is saying that Russia did that, and Russia will say Ukraine did it. But either way, that there was no response from this from the other NATO countries. There was a lot of humanitarian response, but not any military response.
Каховської гідроелектростанції. Це може надихати Кремль на нове зло.
Being so that if there is no response, well, why would they not do it again and again? And this is a lot of the argument about this land grabbing, that if we don't support Ukraine and Russia is allowed to land grab, then do other major players, major powers, India, Russia, China, whoever, see, well, they did nothing when they land grabbed here. So why can't we do that? Why can't we grab Taiwan? Can't we grab this, blah, blah, blah? So that we need to set a precedent to not do that. Although the West setting the precedents for in legal invasions of sovereign nations, we might not be the best example of that over the past 50 years.
Зупинити його – це обов'язок.
That is the responsibility of everyone in the world to stop it. So appealing to people to stop this going forwards.
Не може залишитись осторонь, бо радіація нікого не залишає.
Then talks about a strike that happened in the Kharkiv Oblast, which a number of people were wounded and killed, and amongst these children. But then he speaks about how then that Russia will be held responsible for these attacks and will be held to account as well in the way that he says they destroy life. And that he then brings up about World War II with then the Nazis,
Справедливо і неминуче на кожен
that every blow inflicted to every terrorist. The Nazis tried to hide from justice,
намагалися сховати світ правосуддя. І доволі довго, але багатьох
but many of them were found and are still being prosecuted. But we know that the people who were prosecuted for war crimes were prosecuted on the losing side of the battle, and it was a very different outcome to what we could potentially see. So, like he says, but they are found and still being prosecuted, and does imply that Ukraine will go after these people who are commanding. Does say that we will catch the Russians much faster.
Значно швидше. І, до речі, зараз у мене ще буде нарада з міністром внутрішніх.
Saying we know how to put terrorists in their place.
Дякуємо.
So Renat Kasha, advisor, the head of that long word, which operates Russia's nuclear network. Guardian reported they said, under cover of darkness overnight on the 5th of July, the Ukrainian military will try and attack the Zaporizhia station using long-range precision equipment and kamikaze attack drones. Now, I was there about this time last year when we had similar threats. Russia was staging military actions from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, but Ukraine was also launching attacks back upon the plant. Not only shelling going in, but also troops crossing the Dnieper River and launching ground-based attacks from there, none of which came to any real success. So let's have a look at what the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, actually has to say. Now, this was July the 4th, update 170. These are all available online. So we spoke yesterday how then we saw this is yesterday's one, that has been reconnected to its only available backup power line 4 months after it was lost, but the site's power situation remains extremely fragile. This was yesterday we spoke about this. Now, that was update 169, but 170. That ZNPP lost the connection to its main external power line early this morning, forcing it to rely on recently restored backup power supplies for electricity needs it needs for essential nuclear safety and security functions. So the disconnection, this 750 kV power line, meant they had to switch to the available 330 kV backup power for electricity. And here's the Director General Rossi said, this time the plant avoided a complete loss of external power, which has happened 7 times previously during the conflict. But the latest power line cut again demonstrates the precarious nuclear safety and security situation at the plant. Now, interestingly, this was spoken about in update 168, which came on the 30th of June. So significantly less than a week ago. So team of experts were able to inspect parts of the plant's cooling system, including some sections of the perimeter and large cooling pond. This channel and the cooling pond hold reserves of water that remain available for the use of the ZNPP, despite the destruction downstream of the Kakhovka Dam more than 3 weeks ago. So there's enough water there. We know they've got separate cooling ponds and can pump water from the access route there. The IAEA experts have been conducting regular walkdowns across the 6 reactor units and other areas around the site. Access to further areas is still expected, including parts of the turbine halls and some parts of the cooling system. As previously indicated, the IAEA is aware of reports that mines and other explosives had been placed in and around the ZNPP, including mines near the cooling pond. We take such reports very seriously, and I have instructed our experts at the site to look into this matter and request access they need for doing their job. Until now, they have not observed any mines or other explosives. Further access would be needed. As Director General Grossi said last week, no mines were observed at the site during his visit on the 15th of June. His third in less than 10 months. However, the IAEA has been aware of previous placement of mines outside the plant perimeter, which the agency has reported about earlier. Continuing to say, we're reinforcing our own presence at the plant to monitor compliance with these principles that are the paramount importance for protecting the plant and preventing a major nuclear accident during the war. So speaking of that, there were mines outside of the plant, as we've spoken about 2 weeks ago, I think, for defence that would not take out the plant. The size of the explosion or a strike needed to actually melt down a power plant. Remember, a power plant is basically like a bunker, big concrete walls, whatever. There's been a lot of fighting here, and we haven't seen any breaches. So there's going to be a huge explosion needed to take this out. And with NATO monitoring absolutely everything from the bloody satellites, from planes in the Black Sea, through lots of things, surely they would know if there is an explosive of that size, who it actually was that conducted this. And for those objects, as Zelensky said, resembling mines on the top of the power plant, surely things like satellites could pick up exactly what that is. We had bloody half a century ago, U-2 spy planes that could apparently read number plates. So surely would have some idea what is actually going on there. But these mines located outside the plant, they're not going to have any damage on that. Should they be there? No, absolutely not. There should be no explosive, no military, no weapons, no nothing within a power plant. But at the end of the day, those mines are not going to take down a power plant. Further though, Ukrainian official accounts have been sharing this. This one is from the ZSU. Translated here, and this has been for as well by medical official accounts too. In the event of an explosion at the ZNPP, residents of the potential radiation accident zone must be prepared for a possible evacuation. From the Ministry of Health. If authorities have officially notified a radiation emergency, stay indoors or get out as soon as possible. Stay tuned for further announcements and follow the instructions from the authorities. In case you're advised to evacuate, pack the list from the Ministry of Health in your suitcase or backpack. Attention, if you are in the zone of radiation incident, you can leave buildings only after the relevant instructions of the authorities. Local authorities will inform you of the location and evacuation points, as well as the safest travel route if you're evacuating by your own car. And this is the list given here. Sorry, this is the one in Ukraine and then this in Russia. So your documents, face mask, respirator, first aid kits, wet wipes, things like this to then evacuate with. And this is being shared around a little bit of everywhere. And if you want to know the effectiveness of some of this, I'd point you to those podcasts as well. I did these specifically for when that was being talked about, this time last year-ish. So there's also Ukrainian officials saying that occupants, being the Russian occupiers, are leaving the power plant in mass from the threat of the ZNPP, although I haven't seen any geolocated stuff of troop movements in mass out of this region. So we're not particularly sure on exactly what is happening there. Something very interesting in this, though, as well, was on the June 23rd, and this is by a Ukrainian paper. This was said, and you can read this full thing, but the threat of Russia using nuclear weapons is real. The best way to contain that threat is to make clear to Putin's Russia that it will happen if they use nuclear weapons. Our message is directed at Putin's entourage. If you do that and follow these orders, if they are given, you can expect a serious response from NATO and will be at war with NATO. And that is from the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, as people will say, hinting then at Article 5 being the invoke of NATO to then come into play. As well, that Senator Blumenthal has said the purpose of this resolution is to send a signal to Vladimir Putin and his military that they will be destroyed if they use tactical nuclear weapons or if they destroy the nuclear power plant in such a way that it poses a threat to the nearest NATO members. Putin's troops risk being completely destroyed by NATO's forces if they prove to be so irresponsible and irrational as to use tactical nuclear weapons. That said, we know that using nuclear weapons either way is not going to end well for anyone. So who would actually benefit from this? Because I don't see any clear winner from doing this. Russia would further negatively impact Ukraine's economy, although the land that they are occupying would become uninhabitable for centuries. And Ukraine would benefit by NATO potentially then triggering strikes against Russia, but of course causing a massive ecological, medical disaster for their land and their people for so long. Now, I hope that with these nuclear weapons, nuclear power plants, things like this, that if there is an incident and Article 5 is invoked, that we're not rash with our decisions to then go kinetic and go from there. And if nuclear strikes do take place, can they please happen after the launch of Oppenheimer, as I've already bought tickets. But people have seen Russia's incredibly poor performance throughout this war and equate that to all their systems. And I believe that this is an incorrect way of looking at it. We know Russia does have advanced rocket technology, especially to get into orbit and into space. Between the Space Shuttle program and SpaceX, the Russians launched all our astronauts into space, and we know that that stuff works. I'd also argue that in a doomsday scenario like the Soviets and now Russia talk of all the time, their only real draw card is their nuclear weapons and, of course, the nuclear submarines, which can also carry these. So they need to have those actually being able to be functional. But also, I think as well, if we knew that these nukes wouldn't work, we, as the West, would have no problem going into Ukraine, boots on the ground, more strikes. But the MAD treaty, the Mutually Assured Destruction Treaty, accepts these nuclear powers have the technology and the ability to end the world as we know it. That's why the treaty exists. And I also do question what NATO's response really would be, push come to shove, if Russia did strike with a nuclear weapon. Because a counterstrike would be so devastating to human life and the world economies. Realistically, is America prepared to sacrifice itself for the future of Ukraine? I don't know. That's something I'll put to you guys, and we won't know unless horrifically this then comes to that. And that takes this war from the scale of what it is to the largest thing we've seen, and that truly goes into a third world war. And like Einstein said, I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Realistically, I don't think that we're going to see something happen to the ZNPP. And I really, maybe it's my blatant optimism, but I really hope that we don't. Either way, it is horrific. Whether it's staged, whether Russia do it, it doesn't matter. The amount of civilians that will get caught up in this, the amount of ground that will then be irradiated and can't be used. We know Ukraine is a big food bowl that's going to affect those most vulnerable all around the world. The flow-on effect from this is horrible. And there are people beating the drum, like I say, who I think deep down sort of want this to happen as a reason to point fingers more. We do not want this to happen. We don't want the war to expand any further than it already has. And it is already out of control going on. We don't want this, but I don't think that we will see things happen. I don't think there is much of a case for a nuclear buffer zone for defensive or offensive works. I don't really buy that, as it's just horrible. But if Ukraine does have some intelligence, they need to act on that. They need to act on that as they are, like with Zelensky appealing out, but as well that can drum up a lot of support for Ukraine as well and make Russia look bad. And if Russia is truly not doing anything dodgy there, they need to be more open and honest about what is actually happening there with the IAEA. So of course we're talking about scenarios that come with an impossible outcome, that the outcome will never be positive for anyone. So the hopes for fighter jets coming in for this offensive has been squashed again, and we have spoken how we believe that there is probably a case from Ukraine to the West of negligence, saying you've given us this equipment for the counteroffensive, but not all of it to actually have correct combined arms, therefore leading to more deaths, more heartache. It could have been negated by these other equipment going in, that if we wouldn't launch an offensive ourselves like that without this stuff, why are we asking another country to do it without supplying that, if that makes sense? So Admiral Rob Bau, the chairman of the Military Committee of NATO, has said that providing Ukraine with fighter jets they've been asking for will not be solved in the short term. The discussion on fighters is an important one, but it will not be solved in the short term for this counteroffensive. Training these pilots, training the technicians, making sure there is a logistical organisation that can actually sustain these aircraft will not be available before this counteroffensive. We should mix the two discussions. I think it's important and understandable that Ukraine asks for these fighter aircraft, but we should not mix it with the counteroffensive discussion now. Now, as we know, these jets will not arrive in time for the offensive. We knew this, and will probably not even be there by winter, and we don't actually even know, once they arrive, how they will actually perform against the equivalent generation of aircraft that Russia is using. As we say, there is no Wunderwaffen, there is no single wonder weapon other than nuclear weapons, but the fallout from that worldwide, that basically eliminates them from being used. As, like he says, the logistical demand, the maintenance of these, this is the real problem, not only then the training. So with all of that out of the way, however long we are in now, let's have a look at the maps. This map updated pretty much dead on 2 hours ago. Of course, we have Ukraine in the centre of the capital of Kiev. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. We've got Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Interesting to note as well, Russia did move nuclear weapons to Belarus, as where we see Wagner PMC as well. Now, I'm just going to point out a couple more things. Of course, this is Crimea down here, and here we have the Enerhodar, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Of course, this is the cooling pond, the easiest way to find it on the map, and the crossings we have seen previously were down to the east of this power plant and attack from the west. So what we have spoken about a lot is that there has been a lot of talk of Ukrainian forces building a bridgehead across the Antonivka bridge area here. Of course, this bridge is down, but again, there is no showing of different territories in and around this area. And let's then have a look on the ISW and see what changes are in and around here. So one thing we do see on this bridge, and I did miss this yesterday, is it does show that Russia is in control more up around here. Something I should point out as well, here is the Novokhovka Dam. This is down, of course, the Antonovka region is downstream from this, so this is flooded or now drying out. And of course, this is having an effect on this Dnipro River through here, which is where this cooling pond is. We also have an update from then Rybar as well about this. So we see from Nikopol a potential push across, and of course Enerda here as well. And of course, going down that Ukraine is starting something here. 117th and the 118th Mechanized Brigades of the 10th AK of the Armed Forces of Ukraine were moved to the Kremenatsky sector, which were partially located in Stepnogorsk and Kamenetsky. And today a column of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles were moved south of Stepnogorsk. Talking over here on the map, taking into account the transfer of 2 new brigades to the direction of Vasilivka, and the main emphasis in the new phase of the offensive of the Armed Forces of Ukraine will be placed near the Kakhovka Reservoir. At the same time, a simultaneous strike on the side of Nikopol and Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is not ruled out. Of course, it's shown from Nikopol here and as well down to Vasilivka here, which they talk about, saying that there are potential pushes and crossings here to launch something upon the nuclear power plant. So I digress. Let's have a look at this region compared to what it looked like then yesterday. To my eye, from today till yesterday, I don't see much of a change in here, and I don't think that we will see too much change in here, at least for a while things dry out, while there's a lot of other movements going on in other regions. So then let's jump to where we're seeing a lot of the action taking place. And again, maps don't show the full truth. Just because there's no movement doesn't mean there's not dramatic fighting in this region. So don't take no map movements as things aren't happening and there aren't tactical moves taking place and succeeding. So in and around Lobkovy, this Stopovy region, we don't see any movements over the last couple of days, but we do see down to the south of Orikhiv, we do see from yesterday and then through till today, we do see Ukraine made more ground to then the east from here. So from there, that's what we see. Then let's look at this area on then the ISW, as we like to have a little bit of a compare across here. So then what we'll do is bring up yesterday's map and compare it. Now, are we seeing much of a change? No, but I do think that this deep state was catching up to what the ISW showed us yesterday, as we saw this little bit here get taken. So I think that is just catching up from there. But this region here isn't showing any real changes. And then this region around Lobkovy, Stopovy, I don't believe is showing any changes as they move up closer and closer to these major defensive works. So Rybar also released a few maps today. So this one on the left is today's map. Let's change this to how we normally do it. So let's put the newest one then on the right, showing where Russia claims Ukrainian drones were all hit, trying to then hit Moscow. We have spoken that that is a possibility that Ukraine could get drones into Moscow. So let's have a look. Ukraine continue this push to the south of Lobkovy in around here, and this isn't really being simulated across the other maps, but we can't get a clear picture of everything going on here as Rybar just release snippets every so often, but I believe that this actual where the line is showing fairly similar, and they are saying that Russia did hold back these forces in and around here. Then let's go back to the deep state, and have we seen any movements around here? Of course, this we saw a lot of Rivnopol, Ryazani, things like this, and between yesterday and today, we don't see any major moves. Let's have a look on the ISW from yesterday and then till today. And you can actually see 2 days ago on the far left and then yesterday. So then what we do see is a major change. So we're looking at this region here. Take this spot high at 218 for a reference point, as well as this red line. And what we do see is Ukraine cleared a lot more land in here that has been assessed that Ukraine has down near Purutsuni, which we do know that Rybar has speculated on, that there was a lot of Ukrainian push from both Rivnopol and Lavadny in here. So Rivnopol, Lavadny, that they were pushing in on two directions to get this, and that looks like it has been a success and has taken that region. As we know, Ukraine is taking some ground through here, but we do know these large defensive works are still yet to come, and it's going to be a big problem, but that is where we've seen the majority of that taking place. And we got an update that Russia had lost some ground here, that Ukraine had pushed Russia back near Opitny, and we did speak about that small advance last week. So then let's move up into Bakhmut, where we have seen some changes over the past couple of days, and talk about if we're seeing any movements there. So what we do see is what we spoke about, I believe, yesterday. So we're going to go from the south to the north. So let's have a look at this. And of course, this is the most recent map, as we're seeing this pushed back into Klishkivka, which we did see comparing the maps yesterday. So Ukraine did gain some ground in Klishkivka, and Russia is pushing back, and we're seeing they are leveraging off this defensive work here. They're pushing around it, and that can, if you get in behind them, make those defensive works actually even worse, because you've got people tied up there and then can't move out. So Ukraine is pushing on the flank there very hard. So let's just compare this to then the ISW. So this is where we are pushing, and I believe the ISW was a little bit ahead of the game yesterday here. Of course, we have yesterday's then on the left, and this is what we saw. We did see that this was cut off between yesterday and the day before, if that makes sense. So we did see that push, but on the front line region, I don't see any changes really down the south. And to the north, let's have a look what then the deep state is showing. And it is showing that Ukraine did gain more ground near Berkivka. Now, this isn't shown over these two maps. So over the ISW to ISW, it is still shown that Russia did gain some territory back near Berkivka, but the deep state is showing this is on the 3rd, the 4th, then the 5th, that Ukraine did make significant ground between the 4th, the early morning of the 5th at 0400, and then 1100 did make even more ground, pushing somewhat through this first defensive work here. Now, we don't know exactly how that is going, but this is what we did see, and that is significant ground pushing on the north and the south flank of Bakhmut. Now, interestingly, between the deep state and then the ISW, the defensive works are similar, but they're not all shown. So, for instance, to the west of Yahidny and the south of Berkivka, this defensive line here, this isn't then shown on this map, but the other ones in majority are. So, it's hard to exactly know what is what. The only real other change we saw was the north of Sperny. We did see Ukraine gain some territory there, but nothing too dramatic. As you know, there's a lot of fighting going on in and around here, but no major changes. So, legends, that's it from me today. I do appreciate that this video was a longer one, and the other ones have been long, but I really do appreciate you guys being here, hanging in to the end. And if you guys are still here, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's hope by the time this goes live, or by the time we wake up in the morning, that the world hasn't ended and that there isn't a nuclear disaster happening. If you'd like to support me, there's links below, but never feel obliged. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.